What if I told you that one of the most powerful stories in the Bible wasn't about the strongest, the biggest, or the most powerful? No, it was about the bravest. A story of courage that defied the odds, of faith that toppled giants, and of a young boy who showed the world that the size of your heart matters more than the size of your body. So, stay with me. Let's dive deep into this ancient story and discover how a shepherd boy, armed with nothing more than a simple slingshot and a heart full of faith, took on a giant and changed the course of history. This story will leave you wondering, if David can face the giant, what giants can you face in your own life? Thousands of years ago, in a land caught in the middle of an ancient struggle, two great armies faced off in the valley of Elah. On one side, there was the mighty Philistine army, an unstoppable force, ready to crush anyone in their way. But it wasn't just their numbers or their weapons that made them feared. It was their leader, a giant of a man named Goliath. He wasn't just tall, he was a literal giant, standing over 9 feet tall. Imagine that for a moment. Nearly twice the height of the average man, so tall and strong that he was a terrifying sight to behold. His armor was so heavy that it looked like it belonged to a whole army, not just one man. Goliath wasn't just a warrior, he was a force of nature. Every day, for 40 days, Goliath would stand in front of the Israelites and issue a challenge. With a booming voice that echoed across the valley, he would taunt them, calling out to the Israelites, "Choose a man to fight me one-on-one. If I win, you will serve us. But if your warrior defeats me, we will serve you." He wasn't just mocking their strength, he was mocking their faith. And no one from the Israelite camp dared step forward. They were terrified. The giant's size and his words had shaken them to their core, and not a single man had the courage to face him. The Israelite army stood paralyzed, day after day, as Goliath issued his challenge. He wasn't just a threat on the battlefield, he was a symbol of fear, a wall that no one seemed to be able to break through. And then, just when it seemed that the Israelites were destined to bow to the might of the Philistines, something unexpected happened. Something that would turn the tide of the battle. On the other side of the battlefield, there was a young shepherd named David. David wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a mighty warrior. He didn't wear armor or carry a sword. He was just a boy, tending to his father's sheep in the hills, far from the chaos of war. But David's heart was unlike any other. He wasn't afraid of the animals he protected his sheep from, like lions and bears. And more than that, David had something that the Israelites had forgotten. He had faith. He had an unwavering belief that with God, anything was possible, no matter how big the challenge. David was sent by his father to visit the battlefield and bring food to his brothers, who were soldiers in the Israelite army. When he arrived and saw the giant Goliath mocking the Israelites, something stirred deep inside him. It wasn't just the physical size of Goliath that troubled him. It was the injustice, the fear, the lack of faith. David heard the taunts, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't stand by and let this continue. "Who is this man?" he asked, "that he dares to defy the armies of the living God?" David was angry, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't anger out of pride or ego. It was righteous anger. The God of Israel, the same God who had helped David protect his sheep, was being mocked by this giant. And David wasn't about to let that go unchallenged. David's brothers, who were part of the Israelite army, were furious when they heard him speaking up. "What are you doing here?" they scolded. "Why don't you just go back to your sheep?" They couldn't understand why a young boy who wasn't even part of the army would want to challenge the giant. But David didn't back down. His faith was stronger than the doubts of his brothers, stronger than the fear that gripped the entire army. When word of David's anger reached King Saul, the leader of the Israelites, the king called for him. Now, King Saul was a tall man himself, but even he knew that no one in his army had the courage to take on Goliath. When David arrived before Saul, he said something that would change everything. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," David declared. "Your servant will go and fight him." King Saul was taken aback. You're just a boy," he replied. "Goliath has been a warrior from his youth, and you're nothing more than a shepherd." But David didn't flinch. He replied, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep." When a lion and a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. David wasn't relying on his own strength. He was relying on the strength of the God he served. And with that kind of faith, David knew that nothing was impossible. King Saul was convinced. He didn't understand it, but he could see the determination in David's eyes. So he said, "Go, and the Lord be with you." But before David could step onto the battlefield, there was one more thing. King Saul offered David his armor, the very best armor in the kingdom. It was heavy, it was finely crafted, and it was designed to protect the king's most experienced warriors. But when David tried it on, it didn't fit. It was too big, too bulky, and it weighed him down. David realized something important in that moment. He didn't need the king's armor. He needed what had worked for him before: his faith, his courage, and the tools he knew best. So, David took off the armor, left it behind, and walked to the river to gather 5 smooth stones. With nothing more than a simple slingshot and a pouch of stones, David set out to face Goliath. As David approached the battlefield, the sight of Goliath must have been overwhelming. The giant stood in full armor, a weapon in hand, taunting and mocking anyone who dared approach him. But David wasn't fazed. He didn't hesitate for a moment. He knew that he wasn't walking into this fight alone. He was walking into it with God by his side. Goliath, seeing the young boy approaching, scoffed. "Am I a dog," he roared, "that you come at me with sticks?" He couldn't believe that the Israelites had sent a boy to fight him. He was used to facing powerful warriors, not a shepherd. He mocked David even more, saying, "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." But David wasn't intimidated by Goliath's words. Instead, he answered boldly, his voice carrying across the valley. "You come against me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands." David wasn't just making a threat. He was declaring his faith in God's power. He wasn't focused on Goliath's size or strength. He wasn't worried about the weapons Goliath had. He was focused on the truth that the battle belonged to God, and God would be the one to deliver victory. David had made up his mind. This wasn't just about defeating a giant. It was about showing the world that God's power could overcome anything. It was about proving that when we trust in God, even the most impossible odds can be overcome. With that, David ran toward Goliath, slingshot in hand. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look back. He took that first step toward the giant with confidence, his faith driving him forward. As David swung the slingshot, he knew that it wasn't the slingshot or the stone that would defeat Goliath. It was God's power that would strike the blow. And in that moment, David's faith in God's strength would prove to be more powerful than anything the world had to offer. As he ran, he swung his slingshot, the stone spinning faster and faster, faster than Goliath could imagine. And then, in one fluid motion, David released the stone. The stone flew through the air, straight and true. It was like everything slowed down for a moment, the world pausing to see what would happen next. The stone struck Goliath in the forehead, right between his eyes, the most vulnerable spot on his massive head. And in that single perfect shot, everything changed. Goliath, the mighty giant, the warrior who had struck terror into the hearts of entire armies, fell. He fell to the ground with a deafening crash, as if the earth itself could no longer support his weight. For a moment, there was silence. The air was thick with disbelief. On the Israelite side, soldiers stood frozen, staring in shock. On the Philistine side, there was panic. Goliath, their champion, their giant, was lying motionless on the ground. The sound of his fall echoed across the valley. And in that silence, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The Israelites couldn't believe it. Could it be true? Could this young boy, this unarmed shepherd, really have taken down the most fearsome warrior they had ever faced? David, standing over Goliath's fallen body, wasn't celebrating. He wasn't jumping around in triumph. Instead, he walked forward with purpose. With God's strength, he took the sword from Goliath's own side and used it to cut off the giant's head. The Philistine army, seeing their champion defeated, turned and fled in terror. The Israelites, who had been paralyzed by fear, suddenly found themselves filled with courage. They chased down the retreating enemy, securing a victory that no one had believed was possible. And the world would never forget what happened that day in the valley of Elah, where a boy faced a giant and, through faith, changed the course of history forever. So, the next time you find yourself up against a challenge, whether it's something small or something that feels impossible, remember this story. Remember David. Remember that you don't need to be the strongest, the biggest, or the most powerful. You just need to have the courage to step forward, to take that first step, and trust that God will equip you with everything you need to succeed. Whatever you're facing today, whatever giants are standing in your way, know this: you don't have to fight them alone. God is with you, just as He was with David. His strength is greater than anything you could face, and with Him by your side, you can overcome anything. So, take that step. Have faith. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a giant in your life? Maybe it was a challenge that seemed too big to overcome. Something that made you feel small or powerless. What was it? And how did your faith help you push through? We all face tough times, but it's in those moments that we can choose to trust in God's strength. Just like David did. If David's story resonated with you, I'd love for you to share your story in the comments below. How have you seen faith bring you through your own struggles? What giants have you faced, and how did your belief in God help you overcome them? Your experience could be the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it with others who might need a little inspiration, and subscribe to the channel for more uplifting and inspiring Bible lessons like this one. Remember, No matter what giants you're facing, you don't have to face them alone. With faith, you have the strength to overcome anything. Thank you for being a part of this community, and I look forward to hearing your stories. Until next time, keep trusting in God's plan for your life.